Okay, I know we are all tired and time is a scarce resource, as we said in the last 2 days. But we move now into another important session, which is dedicated to how we can better protect academic freedom by developing dedicated programs for scholars and for students. And when Scholars at Risk was created, we had very well in mind that our aim was to reach a national program of fellowship for scholars, and because this would make the work that single universities and research institutions are doing much more sustainable, but also because it was somehow thought to promote a sense of sustainability on the one hand and of a synergy between different universities and therefore to create a community. So we found particularly important to invite different representatives of organizations, networks that are working in different regions to support scholars in recreating a community of knowledge around their work and to support different national and international communities working with displaced or at-risk scholars. So one of the aims of this session is to listen to their experience, their work, and to capitalize on this in order to enhance the work that national sections and particularly Scholars at Risk Italy is doing. And a second aim is to advocate, to start advocating, as the students who spoke before us brilliantly have done, to advocate for a program for scholars, which was and remain one of our main objectives. And thanks to the initiative of students also to combine the project of a national program for scholars with a national program for at-risk students. So with this in mind, I'm pleased to introduce, and I warmly thank for their presence, our first speaker, who is Emily Borzik, who is Assistant Director of the recently established European Office of the Scholars Rescue Fund, which is part of the International Institute of Higher Education. Emily, many thanks for being with us today. I will introduce all the speakers in a row so that we then move to their presentation. And then we have Nicole Tuzninski. I apologize in advance for the mispronunciation in case, is Associate Director of the New University in Exile Consortium, which is based in the New School in New York. And then Christina Rogers, who is the Managing Director of Academic Solidarity at Freie University Berlin. Julia Runte, who's the project officer for Afghan scholars and students at risk program within the Global Campus of Human Rights in Venice. Michael Berry, many thanks to you as well, who is distinguished university professor at the American University of Afghanistan, currently in exile, and an internationally renowned expert on Islamic art history. And then we have, last but not least, two students from the University of Padova, Giulia Bergsten and Ludovica Marangoni, who will speak about a national program for at-risk students. I'm sorry, we have to be very strict with the timing, so as agreed, each speaker has no more than 8 minutes. Thank you very much, and Emily, the floor is yours.
Great. Hello, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes, okay, good. Thank you very much for the introduction and for having me here. As was said, my name is Emily Borzik, and I'm the Assistant Director with the Scholar Rescue Fund at the Institute of International Education. IIE is based in New York, but I, since October, have been based in Brussels, heading Scholar Rescue Fund's new Europe office, where I'm working to strengthen and build our partnerships with European universities and other organizations. There's been a lot of great discussion over today and yesterday about academic freedom and the ongoing need to support persecuted and displaced scholars. And I hope that with my presentation, I can provide some insight into how the Scholar Rescue Fund responds to these needs and how we could possibly be a part of a coordinated response in Italy. I am going to use some slides, so hopefully this works easily. Let me try. Can I share my screen?
Sorry,
can anybody see my slides? Yes.
Huh? Okay.
Can you see them? No.
Sorry, I've lost it. No,
Does sharing my screen not work in this instance, or?
No, we can't see your screen.
Okay, well then, I will just go without steps. And that's okay. Sorry about that.
Let me make you a sorry, maybe you should have, okay, let me just make you a co-host, Emily, sorry. I thought you were.
Okay.
I've lost you. Okay, now it should work.
Try again. Okay, let me see.
Emily, could you also raise your volume a little bit if you manage? Your voice. Or your voice. Raise your voice. That's fine.
Right. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Is this okay?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And you can see my slides.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Good. All right. Here we are. So IIE, the Institute of International Education, for those of you who are not familiar, as I said, we're based in New York, and since our founding about a century ago, have been dedicated to programming in higher education and professional international exchange, administering hundreds of different programs that operate in the US, globally, regionally. In 2002, IIE founded the Scholar Rescue Fund, and in essence, Scholar Rescue Fund is a fellowship program for threatened and displaced scholars. We work with scholars who typically hold a PhD and are professors or professional researchers who are experiencing persecution due to their teaching and their research or their identity, or who are fleeing violent conflict. They can be from any academic field in nearly any country in the world. Students are not within our scope, including PhD students. Working with partnering host institutions, we co-fund, arrange, and support year-long fellowship appointments in safe places where scholars can continue their work. A strong theme throughout these days, drawing on the University of Padova's 800th anniversary, is history and tracing this work from past centuries to the modern day. And this is a familiar theme at IIE as well. As I said, we were founded in 1919, and since then, IIE has been working to support scholars and students in need, including throughout many of the global crises that you see listed in these slides. And some of the discussions that go on today in Europe that advocate for a permanent EU program also echo conversations at IIE 20 years ago. The idea behind the permanent program of SRF was to put in place a mechanism to support threatened and displaced scholars permanently, so that we don't need to reinvent the wheel for each crisis that arises. And so since then, since 2002, our program has supported 1,006 different scholars from 60 different countries, and we worked with 452 different host institutions in 51 countries. We really are a global program. We work with universities and other institutions of higher learning in Europe, in Asia, throughout the continent of Africa and Latin America, and in the United States, North America. You can see on this slide kind of the regions that SRF fellows have come from throughout the program's history and also so far in 2022. Certainly the numbers in the MENA region historically are heavily influenced by the Iraq project, which was a special initiative that SRF ran from 2007 to 2014 to support scholars from Iraq. And during that time, I believe we supported more than 300 scholars from Iraq. The increase in support of scholars from Central, East, and South Asia is definitely due to support for scholars from Afghanistan and Myanmar. And in Latin America, that increase can be attributed to our support of scholars from Venezuela. The Europe and Eurasia numbers do not reflect recent selections of scholars from Ukraine and Russia. And so as the year progresses, we would expect that proportion to change. And our host regions. So we support scholars, like I said, globally. Europe has always played an important role in our work since, for the last 20 years, and we expect that to continue. And the MENA region is an incredibly important place for scholars to undertake their fellowships. Jordan is in our top 5 host countries and has been integral in our support of scholars from Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. So how exactly does Scholar Rescue Fund work? Working with partnering host institutions, Scholar Rescue provides selected scholars with a fellowship grant of up to $25,000. That grant is typically matched by the host institution for a year-long academic appointment. SRF also provides supplemental benefits, including relocation funding, the opportunity to apply for funding for professional development and language training, and also an individual health insurance plan. The placement process is really highly personalized, and it's based on the preferences and the needs of the scholars and the host universities. The Scholar Rescue Fund Fellowship is typically renewable for a second year, so many SRF fellows receive 2 years of support from our program, and many remain at the same host institution for 2 years. We have been working in Italy for quite some time. So since 2005, 7 different institutions in Italy have hosted 10 SRF fellows, and 8 of these fellows have been hosted since 2015. So the work of our partnerships with Italian universities is really more recent, and that's something that we really hope will continue in the coming years. So in addition to working with individual universities, we have a number of broader partnerships that help us facilitate our work, whether through referrals of applicants, through placements, or through funding. We also often work closely with Scholars at Risk and with the various SAR country sections and other organizations that are involved in this work, particularly throughout Europe. And since we're here to talk about the possibility of a national level program in Italy, it's worth highlighting our work with the Finnish National Agency for Education, or EDUFI. We think that this model could serve as something of a model for establishing a similar program or partnership in Italy. So with our partner with EDUFI, it's really it's really a 4-way partnership. EDUFI, as a semi-government agency, helps us coordinate with Finnish universities to find placements for selected SRF scholars. Not only do they help us coordinate, but they actually provide the funding to match the SRF fellowship. So it's not up to the individual universities to come up with the funding to host an SRF fellow. That said, of course, the host institutions are an integral part of this recipe. They are providing a year-long academic appointment, visa sponsorship, as the main points of contact with SRF fellows throughout their appointments. They're providing very important academic and often personal support. And really from all 3 organizations, scholars are getting dedicated staff support and assistance. And really it's a great way to coordinate expertise among kind of three different branches. And I think it goes without saying that the scholars, of course, are a very important part of this partnership, who come to these universities and provide academic expertise, field and country expertise, are contributing to research and teaching at their host institutions. So aside from kind of the idea of a national program in Italy, that's a little bit coordinated, the best way to get involved with Scholar Rescue Fund is to express interest through the SRF Alliance. And information about this can be found on our website. What this is really just, it's our global network of partners that offer practical support to SRF fellows. And of course, one of the major ways that someone can do that is by offering to host a scholar. So if you're interested in looking into how you can work with Scholar Rescue Fund, I encourage you to find some information online about the SRF Alliance and express interest through there. And finally, I just want to say that I understand that there may be many scholars watching here today that may be interested in applying for Scholar Rescue Fund support. This presentation has been focused on the hosting side of things, but if you think that you might want to apply, I would encourage you to visit our website as a first step and review the eligibility criteria. And you can always write to us with questions.
Thank you very much.
And really, that's it. I try to keep it brief. I'm happy to answer questions during the Q&A period. And if anybody is interested in learning more about IIE's history in this work and on our current work, I'm going to put a link in the chat for those who are on Zoom to a book that we published on the history of this work and our current work. That is, it's a good way to kind of get a good history of our program. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Emily, for highlighting particularly how Scholars Rescue Fund works both with individual institutions and national ones. I think that's very useful for Scholars at Risk Italy, as well as for highlighting how we can contribute to support. Also, I'm curious about the ambassadors side, but we'll leave it just for questions. So I now invite Nicole to take the floor. Are you with us?
Thank you. Yes. Hello.
Hello, Nicole. Yeah.
I also have slides, if that's okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Are you seeing?
Yes, that's right.
Everything look okay? Great, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm delighted to be participating. My name is Nicole Pazinski, and I'm the Associate Director of the New University in Exile Consortium based at the New School in New York City. You may know the New School is the home of the original University in Exile, created in 1933 by the New School's first president, Alvin Johnson, to provide a safe haven for intellectuals fleeing the growing threat of Nazism in Europe. And 85 years later, the consortium's founder and director, who's I believe online with us today, Professor Arian Mack, launched the consortium to address a problem she had identified, having herself brought a number of threatened scholars to the New School. That is, many of them faced a second exile. Though they were safe, they were left more or less on their own in their new academic homes. Realizing that this was a common problem for endangered scholars, Arian launched the consortium in the fall of 2018 with the mission of creating a welcoming, supportive, and vibrant intellectual community for exiled scholars. At the outset, we had 13 universities and colleges in the US, and today the consortium has grown to 52, soon to be 60 members globally in Canada, France, Germany, Italy, the University of Padova being the first of many, we hope, Jordan, Netherlands, Poland, South Africa, Switzerland, the UK, and the US. Each institutional member is committed to hosting at least one exiled scholar, and together we support over 70 scholars from 20 different countries. We work with the endangered scholars hosted by our member institutions, both individually and together, to try and lessen the profound sense of dislocation which exiled scholars commonly suffer from and which can adversely impact their intellectual and personal lives. To that end, we have created a number of programs and activities, which I will tell you a bit more about later. But first, I would like to mention that in the past year, the consortium has expanded its mission to include finding placements for threatened Afghan and Ukrainian academics, students, and artists at consortium member institutions. hearing about Afghan academics fired and artists prevented from doing their work, witnessing women and girls being banned from attending school in Afghanistan like beyond the 6th grade, made it necessary for us to take action. In February, the unwarranted invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which led to the outright destruction of institutions of higher education by the Russian troops, again demanded that we do all that we could to help. Right away, we reached out to our network of higher education institutions to try and coordinate a response. We joined other organizations in the field to learn and to ensure that we weren't duplicating work. And we relied on our colleagues from Afghanistan and Ukraine to help us figure out where and how we could have the biggest impact learning as we went. We began to receive direct messages from Afghan scholars and students, and we matched their needs to the best of our ability with consortium member institutions who would be able to host them. For example, we connected students, some of who you'll see on the screen here today, who had arrived at military bases in the US with Northeastern, where they're now enrolled with full tuition, room and board. And a great many of our consortium member institutions are hosting scholars and students and their families, more than I'll take the time to mention here today. At the new school, we are working to create a university in exile for artists. Partnering with our colleagues at the Artistic Freedom Initiative, we plan to bring 10 endangered Afghan artists to the programs and divisions in the arts on one-year fellowships, residential fellowships. Renowned Afghan musician Ahmad Banus will be the first artist in residence in fall 2022, and he'll be hosted by the Matta School of Music in the College of Performing Arts. And these are some photos of him here. So then fast forwarding in February, when the war in Ukraine began, we anticipated again ramping up our efforts to support scholars and students. Local partners like the Ukrainian Global University based in Kyiv and consortium member institution Kosminski University in Warsaw were essential in helping us figure out how to best allocate our resources. We developed some new models of support for the consortium to include virtual fellowships, residential fellowships for both students and scholars. And we also worked with Siemens, the German-based company, who agreed to donate 200 laptops, which will be shipped to Kherson University in Ukraine via the consortium member institution, Kosminski University, based in Warsaw. We also issued a statement, which has since been signed by over 1,600 people from across the globe, condemning in the strongest possible terms the Russian invasion of Ukraine and declaring our support for the people of Ukraine. So now with the time I have left, I'd like to highlight some of our core programming, the activities and programs that we have offered for consortium hosted scholars since our launch in 2018. The first is our Cornerstone program, which is our weekly scholars seminar. Each week we meet over Zoom with our consortium scholars for a seminar led by a distinguished academic. And you can see here the previous 4 years and the future, what we'll be doing in the fall. Professor Lawrence Rosenwald will be leading the seminar next year. We use this time to talk about themes, intellectual themes and topics chosen by the scholars themselves. And we also use it as an opportunity to regularly check in with them and create personal connection between them. This is another program which we think is very important, our co-led online seminars, which are free and open to the public. The seminars give consortium scholars the opportunity to co-lead a seminar alongside an endangered colleague of their choice. They serve to connect exiled scholars to the academic community, which they have lost, and reconnect students with their professors. They offer learning opportunities to students everywhere that might not otherwise be available. The past semester, we hosted 7 such seminars, 2 of which were co-sponsored by our colleagues at University. And they're comprised of a wide array of topics from language, identity, and gender to comparative racism. You can see more listed here. And we do have quite a significant reach. I think our most popular seminar, we had over 1,500 people register. We have an annual conference. This past year, the conference was titled The Life Stories of Exiled Scholars, Perils and Power of Academic Freedom Today. It's organized by our consortium scholars, and they're the speakers as well. We have an annual retreat, and this past May, we hosted the first in-person annual retreat for our members in North America. And it's a really wonderful opportunity to both come together in person and to spend time together in a more informal way. We also use the time to evaluate the previous year's programming and to think about how we can improve our programs and activities going forward. We offer resources including the Library Access Initiative, which provides endangered and stranded scholars with access to the electronic resources of consortium member institutions' libraries, and the Consortium Global Sourcebook, which is an online database of over 200 resources that could be potentially helpful for endangered scholars and students. Okay.
Yeah,
and just to wrap
Nicole,
up,
yeah, just okay. 1 minute.
Wrapping up. As you'll see on the slide here, some lessons learned from the work that we've done in the past year, which is basically that our network of member institutions is completely essential. The consortium has been able to be nimble because we have quite a small staff, and we've been able to react quickly to many different scenarios. And it's been confirmed for us, as we know, that it's essential for us to address each case individually with scholars or students or artists. And of course, the biggest and most difficult question remains, which is what happens for these scholars and students after their fellowships run out. So in closing, I'd like to just say thank you. And if there are any representatives from Italian universities in the audience today who would be interested in joining the consortium, please reach out to us. I'll put our website and email in the chat. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nicole. And I think it was particularly useful and inspiring the mention you made to the need to complement in-residence fellowship with remote virtual fellowships, because this is something that comes across in different contexts by different scholars. And I hope we will have some time to address the issues you raised in the debate. So Christina Rogers, the floor is yours.
When the slides are ready, I'm ready. Will you help me clicking through?
I'll help you clicking through. I'll just
Okay.
share on Zoom. So
Okay, but I can say hello, and I guess thank the organizers of Scholars at Risk, especially Claudia Padovani and you, Francesca, for inviting me to this conference. And today, yes, I would like to present to you the work of Academics in Solidarity. It is a program for displaced and at-risk researchers located at the Freie Universität Berlin, and in which we tackle the issues of academic freedom. LIBERTAS is the topic of this, from the practical point of view of mentoring. Yeah, and the next slide. Thank you. So at the core of our work lies a peer mentoring program in which we connect at-risk scholars seeking support to established researchers working on similar research topics in any given environment of the people approaching us. This doesn't mean that these people necessarily always live in the same spot. We also have digital mentoring tandems, but I can get back to that if there is time for discussion. So far, we have about 130 mentees within our program and roughly 110 mentors, of which most, but certainly not all, reside in Germany. The initial focus was on Germany, Lebanon, and Jordan. And this perspective came about because the program was initiated as a reaction to the summer of migration and in response to the war in Syria. And also acknowledging that these countries, Lebanon and Jordan, have taken up a considerable amount of refugees in the time. but it became closer? Okay, thank you. But it quickly became clear that this geographical narrowing down didn't sufficiently address the realities of migration movements and the political shifts worldwide. So it is safe to say that we are now a network of transnational composition and self-understanding with researchers reaching from Venezuela, Turkey, Yemen, Afghanistan, and Ukraine. So we are open to researchers in postdoc positions of all disciplines and offering mentoring, academic counseling, but also additional trainings and the funding of research endeavors. And the next slide, please. So here you can see an overview of the ongoing components of our program, but before I get to each of these points, I wish to say a few words regarding the general understanding of IS. As the name suggests, our focus lies on pushing for networks of solidarity to achieve roughly twofold. Firstly, to foster a fresh start to people who enter a new environment, a new country, a respective society and research scene. So in the case of political prosecution or forced displacement especially, this often means that ties to previous networks are spontaneously severed, and thus a considerable amount of social, financial and cultural capital is lost. Our goal is to offer guidance to those seeking support by allowing access to building new communities, thereby trying to address what yesterday Ali and Asla have described as feelings of unbelonging. At the same time, and secondly, mentoring focuses in a way on playing the long game, so offering people counseling and guidance not only within restricted parameters of 1 to 3 year job security, but rather focusing on bridging between different paths, i.e. between fellowships, bridging between, let's say, fixed-term contracts, and maybe working on more long-term career path and other developments. So this means that we closely work together with partners offering fellowship programs for at-risk researchers, and for example, supporting scholars in finding host institutions and mentors who can act as partners to their applications, to research grant proposals, and ideally to transnational research partnerships that might offer long-term job positions. This also means supporting scholars in finding career paths beyond the narrow confines of the university, such as within research institutions, the private sector, or other areas in which the academic expertise of mentees may be appreciated. As this is a difficult task within the German but also the European research system and other knowledge-based professions, we offer other things additionally. Thank you. So one key component is to offer custom-fit trainings and workshops that might help people give access to areas they wish to be involved in, such as workshops on how to navigate the German research scene, developing career paths outside of academia, or writing research grants, which is really important to survive the German academic system. But it may also involve, for example, if people, like yesterday, a person said, well, I would like to write a book and I don't know how to approach this. This could be one topic we would approach with workshops. Another one is a component are an annual network conferences where we first and foremost try to advocate for pressing issues related to people in exile, matters of migration, but also structural changes so desperately needed in addressing displacement and the demands of scholars at risk. Because as my introduction might paint a rosy picture of our endeavors, our members are facing considerable challenges of a highly competitive job market, of restrictive border regimes, of political neglect and unsafe social environments where our reach is often limited. So there can't be enough public outreach when it comes to the difficulties. The conferences are also a possibility for people to come together and share their experiences and their research, while we can work with our transnational partners at the same time. And another key component is financial assistance that we give to our mentees in their research and work endeavors by offering easy access to small grants covering the costs for conference attendances, costly open access publishing, and the like. So one part of mentoring is that people say, oh, you have to do more. Of course, we want to change things structurally, but then you also have to give the means to actually do these things. When it says perish or publish, it's expensive to publish. So these are things that we want to support. Yeah. And finally, it is our deepest interest to politicize the viewpoints of our members, make their voices heard, and include their knowledge into the wider debate. And I think we tackled some of this before. IS Policy is an initiative to insert perspective of exiled scholars into policy developments by actively supporting the publication of policy briefs on topics that our mentees choose to tackle. So here, for example, is our first policy brief that was published by Çağla Diner and Asli Aydemir on what is needed to support scholars in exile more long-term, and especially what fellowships and other things give, this very much appreciating what is there, but also pinpointing what might be missing. And on a similar note, IS has published a book this year. It has come out 2 weeks ago, 3. And Asli will know 3 weeks ago because she was a part of the publication. In which we try to bring perspectives of academics in exile into the larger debate and offer mentees the chance to present their research. So I'll sum up. We think it is highly important to work in concert with further transnational networks, such as you here in Italy, and players on the global scene, because as our relationships to our Middle Eastern partners, but also ties to the here present New University in Exile Consortium have shown, there can't be enough funding, support, and general awareness for fellow colleagues that are in exile or restricted in their academic freedom. This above all entails to work in concert. I gave myself 8 minutes, and I can't stop it, yeah. This above all entails to work in concert with those affected. The bottom-up initiatives, for example, of exiled scholars, and Off University was mentioned. This is one of these many bottom-up initiatives where exiled scholars have created considerable digital and virtual and other material networks to assist each other. So it entails jointly fighting academic precarity and social exclusion, and thus achieving better conditions for academic freedom, but also freedom of movement, not for those in exile, but rather with them. And I was kind of inspired by what Ali said yesterday, because I was thinking of Donna Haraway again, and to put it in the words of this feminist thinker, it might be it means staying with the trouble and making kin. Yeah, thank you so much. That was it. I'm clapping for myself.
Thank you very much. And Michael, I think it's
my turn. Okay.
No, it's Julia.
I'm sorry.
Excuse me. Julia.
I'll just wait for the slides. And I can click through.
Batteria quasi scarica.
Yours. No, it's not my PhD. It's not my computer. You can move it there if you. Yes, that is it.
No, I've got share. Sorry, Google share. This one. Yes.
Okay, hello and good afternoon. So yes, my name is Julia Rente. I'm the project officer of what had initially started as the Students and Scholars at Risk program at the Global Campus of Human Rights, which we have slowly adopted to a new name of the Threatened Afghan Scholars and Students Project, to have no confusion with SAR, because there was some initially in the beginning. I will do a very quick background of what the Global Campus of Human Rights is, and then talk more about the program. So we are, in essence, a network of universities around the world. Right now, we are just under 100 universities, and we have 7 hubs across the world. They're listed up on the slide there. Our biggest program is a Human Rights Master, and that is the core focus of all the programming. However, we do additional capacity building and training programs. And what came out of that is when the fall of Kabul happened last August, as a university network, we had a social responsibility and a need to help. And so we did an immediate response to the crisis. We reached out to all of our partners, all of our university networks, as well to the EU Commission directly, and they then granted us very quickly, surprisingly for the EU Commission, money to sponsor a scholarship program, and then that was born. So a bit about the program. So our main funding stream, as I just mentioned, is from the EU Commission. as well as the Right Livelihood Foundation, which is known as kind of the alternative Nobel Prize. And as of this week, I can happily confirm that the EU has just confirmed they will continue funding us for an additional 2 years. We learned that this week, and that was very, very good news for us. We are one of the few programs, similar to what Emily was saying before. We do both placements and offers of funding. What we do is we make an affiliation with one of the universities in our network. It can be a student or scholar. It does not have to be just PhD or postdoc level. A recipient in our program does have to have some connection to human rights, but of course, this does not mean they have to be like a direct social activist, but they are in threat, they have threat because of their work that has a connection to that. And what our scholarship does is we provide a monthly living stipend. We assist with tuition or enrollment fees if needed, but most of our universities have either greatly waived these or waived them completely. And we also help pay for travel, visa, and some university support. We also, now that we have more placements finally in place, which I'll give a little more detail on in a moment, we are starting to build some more programming and activities. Here you see on the slide this wonderful big textile art that was actually created by an Italian in honor of Afghanistan. And we, back in March, hosted an event for the Afghan New Year and brought together a bit of the Afghan community throughout Italy, which was, number one, a great event for us to host and to see. It was also one of the first times many Afghans in Italy had seen others together or for the first time. And one thing that has come out over the past 2 days is the idea of continuing a network of scholars or wherever people are from. And we are now beginning to build upon that with different activities. And I am actually happy also to say that a few of my recipients are here in the audience, which is nice to see. So a little bit about some of our statistics. As of this week, so we have 34 placed recipients, mostly in the EU. It's where most want to go, but of course we are trying for some other placements in our different hubs. We do have 4 who are still in visa limbo. As everyone who works in any of the projects similar to mine, we know that has been one of the most difficult factors of this process. But we have in Italy, so our partner universities are here at Padova, Ca' Foscari University and University of Bologna. And we have 2 who are working and doing some research directly at our headquarters. We also have the University of Applied Arts in Vienna, University of Zagreb in Croatia, Bucharest, Ljubljana, Ruhr University in Bochum. We have a large group of judges who are doing a project in Poznan. A few are here today. In Spain, we are working with Seville and University of Deusto in Bilbao. And we do have 2 who are working on finishing their PhD project through Matta University. However, they have been relocated for their safety to Germany. And 2 who, one just arrived just about an hour ago, and one is arriving tomorrow at Abo Akademi University in Finland. And so we do have across, as I said, mostly the EU, but we are expanding a bit now. We will be supporting soon a few in Timor-Leste. Yes, while it is not the most economically safe place, it is a safe place, and we have a partnership there with our Human Rights Center of the university, which will be part of our network within the next year. And also, we are working with someone who will be at one of our partner universities in Beirut soon. And just a little bit about kind of the makeup of our recipients. It is fairly half and half of students and scholars. We consider scholar anyone who is PhD level or post. And closely equal, but slightly higher female. Of course, we know women are more at risk, and we do try to reach out to them as well. So we are 53% of our recipients are female. And as you can see, one of the big parts, which also affects funding and also the well-being and mental health well-being of our recipients, are their dependents. an overwhelming amount of our recipients, 85%, have families with them, whether they are young children or spouses or just family they need to bring. And as you can see here, with the amount of people we're supporting, we also have 75 dependents in addition to our 32, which should be updated to 34 now, recipients. And some challenges, which I know is something to talk about, which I will kind of close on, is, yes, as I mentioned before, the visa issue has been such a logistical nightmare, to be very frank, especially since Ukraine happened. Embassies really stopped the process or slowed it down from anyone coming from Afghanistan. And we've been pushing with the European Parliament, who have helped us a bit to work with some of the embassies to help streamline it, to help go it a little faster. The four I said who are in visa limbo, 2 are in Tehran, 2 are in Islamabad, and they have been there for 6 months waiting. And that's just an example of it. And I know, of course, we all want to stand with Ukraine, but I do want to keep a focus. It's my personal idea right now to keep the focus on Afghanistan. And, so many universities and organizations are willing to help and want to help. And we have been learning more and more about what different programs and scholarship programs and placement programs there are. And we are now all starting to work together, which is good, because the end goal is just to help. And the idea of kind of creating an Italian national system, I think it is possible, and we would love to be a part of it. But yes, we know we need to see, the state factor being as welcoming as the university system and different NGOs. And with that, I will close because I know we are also working with timing. My contact is up here if needed, and yes, please feel free to contact with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia, and also for highlighting the importance of not forgetting all the other emergencies we have been dealing with. And Michael, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Grazie mille. We've been hearing the same names recur, repeated, in horror. Ukraine, Afghanistan, Belarus, of course, which is closely associated with the tragedy in Ukraine. And if these names are so coupled, it's obviously because they point to what we used to call in all our languages a touchstone, pietra di paragone, pierre de touche, piedra di tocche, der Prüfstein, or in the language of the Afghans, Sangye Mahak. That is the stone against which you measure the authenticity of a gold coin, by the ring it gives. In other words, Ukraine and Afghanistan have become the touchstone for commitment to universal human rights, and certainly academic rights, which are part of them, in a way where if you refuse to take a stand on either Ukraine or Afghanistan, you are in a sense relativizing or even disqualifying what you are saying about other very, very important and worthy causes. But if these countries are absolutes, it is because the violations are so utterly outrageous. Now, as the distinguished university professor, whatever that means, of the American University of Afghanistan, now in exile, I will speak about Afghanistan, but first I'll touch on Ukraine. Why is it a touchstone? It is because a nation which freely, democratically chose to orient its future with Europe found its national rights denied, its territory invaded, its cities pulverized under bombardment, its population compelled to displacement or exile. Hence, an outrageous violation. In Afghanistan, we seem to have something a little more complex, and yet a nerve is touched. 2 foreign occupations disguised a third foreign intervention. The 2 foreign occupations we know were the Russian, just as brutal as what is happening in Ukraine, and then the American with NATO alliances participation, which resulted in what we can say is shameful failure, and the invisible interference is that of the neighboring state of Pakistan, whose goal is openly, just as much as Putin's in Ukraine, the destruction of the Afghan nation. Now, how do you go about destroying a nation? Well, when Afghanistan became fully independent in 1919, more than a century ago from the British Indian Empire, the 3 pillars that the new Afghan state saw as necessary to construct a national existence were extending the ethnic denomination of Afghan to all ethnic groups, regardless of ethnic origin or sectarian affiliation. Very important. Number 2, universal education for men and women, as enshrined in the Afghan Constitution of 1923. That is almost 100 years ago. And I have to repeat, as I often do, to the Taliban currently in Kabul, or to the people well-meaning who murmur throughout international institutions, aren't we supposed to respect Afghan traditions? Can we project our Western values on another society? The answer to that is when the Afghan Constitution of 1923 insisted on educational rights for men and women, there was not a British soldier or a Russian soldier on Afghan soil. Those were Afghan governing elites who made that decision, and that decision is now 100 years old. So one tradition is as good as another. The third interesting pillar was national archaeology. That is, promote knowledge of a common cultural patrimony for the building of a nation. When the Taliban first took power in 1996, they literally cut down all 3 pillars, insisting that only one ethnic group was entitled to rule. You break down solidarity, dismissing women from the workforce, camouflaged as Islam, but actually provoking the departure of more than 50% of the national administration, and hence the collapse of the administration and the hospital system and the educational system, which was intentional. And the third was destruction of the archaeological patrimony of the country, meaning you have no history, you have no culture, you have no identity, except that which is proposed to you by the madrasas of the Deobandi school in Pakistan. This brings me now to the Islamic issue, and it is one that we cannot continue to skirt around. Islam, like other religious traditions, has many components, many cultural strands, many philosophical aspects, but as we often know, religion can be used simply to terrify non-Muslims by saying, if you do not accept what we do, it is because you don't understand anything about Islam. Oh, isn't that easy to say? Number 2, if you are Muslim, then we brandish against you the threat of takfir, meaning we pronounce you a heretic, an infidel. So we terrorize everybody, and of course the terrorism works because, unfortunately, in the non-Muslim world, what I would call Islamic illiteracy is horrendous. It is not part of the general educational makeup, unlike the Arab philosophers who were taught in the University of Padova as late as the 17th century. But who reads them anymore, except specialists? No, what we have to say, and very strongly, and here I am speaking on behalf of the American University of Afghanistan, human rights, universal human rights, are not culturally determined. They are a permanent struggle and conquest of the entire human family. Little by little, the notion of the universality of human rights has been widened in the teeth of the most ferocious resistance. Need I, and I'm almost done, dear, need I remind you of the dates in which Western societies finally abolished slavery? 1833 in the British Empire, 1848 in the French Empire, 1862 in the Russian Empire, 1863 legally, 1865 actually in the American Empire. Those are statistics which should fill us with shame. Expansion of human rights to include every ethnic group and every gender is an ongoing struggle. At the American University, what do? We are faced with the dilemma of hosting scholars, students seeking asylum. Fine, very hard. Do you know how many students of the American University of Afghanistan in Kabul were evacuated by the United States government last August? 0. Not considered a priority. It is our priority as an institution that is not an expression of the American government, but of what we consider to be universal academic values. And that means, of course, education for men and women. But it also means that, like our sister institutions in Cairo and in Beirut, we have a commitment to defend, promote, research the national cultural dignity of the host nation. That is, like people who are busy with the defense, say, of Tibetan culture, part of our program in Venice, and I hope we'll be seeing much more of Julia and all the other colleagues, this will mean promoting knowledge of Afghanistan's great literatures, its great arts, its wonderful archaeology, not to dwell in the past, but to insist on the equal human dignity of our Afghan students and faculty. And I must insist upon this, because if not, as a former humanitarian worker, I know too well the terrible moral danger in which humanitarians tend to fall, which is, I extend humanitarian assistance to you from my moral level of superiority. No. When I recognize your culture, I can much more easily dismiss outrageous claims of slavery that your current government does. But at the same time, I recognize that you have something to give me. You have something to give the world. And this promotion of Afghanistan's national culture in its greatest sense is going to be one of the essential goals, tasks of our center now opening in Venice. I end by these terrible words. What is happening to Afghan women is slavery. There is no other word for it. Slavery signifies compelling human beings to work for free on pain of death. That is what slavery is. This hiding behind religious justifications is what is happening in Afghanistan. And so, just as in my country, in the 1850s, abolitionists argued we cannot look at ourselves in the mirror as human beings if we accept that certain human beings are constrained to slavery. We cannot accept this. Today, I'm saying, I don't want Roberta Mazzola, I don't want Ursula von der Leyen, I don't want Nancy Pelosi, I don't want Elisabeth Borne, and I don't even want poor old Queen Elizabeth. Fully to sleep at night, realizing that half of the entire human family is considered by some people in Kabul to be no better than slaves. Thank you very much.
Thanks, and harsh task. I invite the students now to conclude this session. I mean, much things to say, including colonialism is never over, but Giulia and Ludovica, please join us. No, yeah, maybe you, yeah.
Come here. I just need to share the screen. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm Ludovica and she's Giulia. We took part to the. Okay. So I'm Ludovica and she's Giulia. We took part on the SAR seminary. In particular, we worked on the proposal of a Students at Risk national program. We divided the work on why we wanted to join this seminar and also why we took part on the proposal of the national program and also on the how me, Giulia, and our group worked on it. So in this seminar, we had the opportunity to develop our knowledge and skills through a deep understanding of the values related to academic freedom and the risks that many students face. We understood that many members of the higher education are threatened and are subject to unfair restriction, are imprisoned and persecuted. Furthermore, academic freedom is fundamental and essential for the quality of education and for research and for teaching. The principle of academic freedom, indeed, which should protect students during their research and also when they ask dangerous questions, is not protected everywhere and or alike. For this reason, we do believe it is time to develop and implement a national program, maybe looking at the examples set by all those countries where a national program has already been developed and implemented. In our advocacy work for academic freedom for students, we got deeply inspired by the speeches of some important personalities such as Sergio Mattarella, the Italian president of Republic, Italian, yes, sorry, in the occasion of the University of Padova 800th conference. Among the enlightening words, we particularly recall Mattarella's emphasis on the academic freedom, both physical and related to the research, the freedom of thinkers, the freedom of speak. The necessity of the freedom is not only personal and individual, should be collective and should be set for the improvement of society. By guaranteeing the freedom of thinkers and researchers, we guarantee also the real growth of society as a whole, understanding it in the broadest possible physical sense, and thus inviting us to overcome barriers and also national boundaries, but encouraging us to approach an international and global vision of academic aid. In such a context of solidarity and closeness, which we find ourselves today, we cannot but consider ourselves all involved in the defense of academic freedom, for those who are sometimes unreasonable and also dishonorable, not protected in this way. It is with this awareness that we have pursued our advocacy work for students in danger condition. And as students, we tend to take a special look on the situation of students just like us. Because of that, during our path in this seminar, we started to focus also on the situation of our colleagues that were threatened by danger in their home countries. And our final conclusion was to add values to our advocacy work, not excluding them of this challenge of building a national program in Italy. We strongly believe that by joining forces through engaging in the advocacy for national program, we will contribute not just for the freedom of intellectual exchanges, but also to give hope again to brilliant people across all over the globe. And I will let Julia speak about how.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm gonna try to be brief because I guess you're all hungry by now. I'm gonna speak on how we think a national program in Italy should and could be implemented for students at risk. So first of all, what is the most important to be able to have a national program for students at risk in Italy is to raise awareness. By raising awareness, we hope to raise knowledge about this subject, which will lead to advocacy, which will lead to more knowledge, which will hopefully lead to funding, which will lead to a program. So that's the first very important point for us to on how a program could be possible. The second point is improving the networks with similar organizations within this context. And this has been very helpful for us in our advocacy and research so far. We have gotten an enormous amount of knowledge from colleagues and people involved in students at risk organizations and student unions. For example, we have been in contact with the Norwegian Students at Risk organization as well as the German one, and also with Matteo Vespa, talking, brainstorming ideas, talking pros and cons about their programs, maybe similarities between their programs, differences, what works, what doesn't work. And of course, we know that it's impossible to take their programs and just apply it to here, but it's been very helpful to know what worked for them, what they don't recommend, what they do recommend, and also they have been very helpful in brainstorming other things that would work here in Italy. So this has been crucial for our advocacy and our knowledge, but also for a hopeful future program. They have also given us some points on what needs to be included in a program, and this cannot come 1-2 years after the implementation of a program. This must be in the planning of the implementation of the program from the beginning. First of all, psychological help needs to be accessible for all students coming here. Them with us, we don't see the program working otherwise. As the people are coming here because they are at risk. They are students, maybe activists, which and they are coming here for a reason which can, well, it must be hard, as we all can imagine. So that is something we see as crucial when planning for and implementing a possible program, as well as the accessibility of legal advice. And we have heard from the law students of Turin, and we see this is also a very crucial point for the program, as these people, as you know, are coming here because they are at risk. And we think this will be very beneficial to them as well, for us, for our universities, and also for the collaboration with the program. And we are suggesting maybe a collaboration between the law students at the Italian universities. Yes, and yeah, now you're all wondering, well, who will pay for this? And we are wondering the same thing. But we have a couple of thoughts on this, on how we think a program could and should be funded. First of all, it needs to come from both adequate and dedicated resources. And it needs to be a mix of public funding and private funding. And this is very important for the sustainability of a program, because we're not advocating for a program that's going to be for 1 or 2 years. We want a program that's going to be forever, hopefully. So we think the program should be somewhat public funded, but also there should be a fundraising mechanism which will reach out to private organizations to have a sustainable program. And also, all of this is not possible without the support of the academic community. So we are calling to put pressure on Italian political parties, the Italian government, the Ministry of University, because once everyone is cautious of the true importance of this program, it will be possible, but not before that. So that is, well, I would say the most necessary thing to bring this program to life. And as I've talked about briefly, the sustainability of this program is very important. And we suggest that scholarships can be given to these students coming here so they can finish their studies to make this program sustainable. And also it's important to talk about who's the target of this program. And we are targeting students at risk that are bachelor and master students. And our program, or our proposal, differs from already existing programs in Italy, as our targets aren't specific to one country or one region. And as we have talked about before today, there is existing programs for Afghan and Ukraine students in Italy and in Padova, but this program would make the action faster. When the crisis or the tragedy happen, it doesn't need to take more time to implement a new program. This program would make would make it a lot faster, which will be beneficial to all students. And yeah, this is just the beginning for us. We're calling on all of you to join us. If you have any questions, you can also visit our Padlet on the QR code or right there, that we have gathered some of our research. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julia. No, you can please stay. Yeah, please. And I'd like to invite Gianmario De Muro, who is, no, he's connected, so you don't have to leave, to comment and respond to the contributions of this session. Gianmario De Muro is Professor of Constitutional Law at the University of Cagliari, and Cagliari has been one of the founding members of Scholars at Risk Italy. And Gianmario has been supporting throughout these years the project of a national program for at-risk scholars. And so Gianmario, please, yeah.
Okay, do you hear? Can you hear me? Well, okay, fine. First of all, let me thank all the organization of this big opportunity to have the chance to discuss this high-level academic freedom, which is not only a universal right. I would say that it is the most important right that is completely connected to the idea of free speech. And so my first comment is that starting from the student, what is very clear in your discussion is that we can work on program with students and academics, which is very, very important in the alliance and in the fund that spoke before, because the dimension of free speech of people who are under an horrible situation, like in Afghanistan or Ukraine or in the Ukraine war or whatever around the world, needs that also students has to be rescued. So this is a very, very important achievement of this morning, that we can work on academics and students for programs that are related. The second achievement, in my opinion, is, and I was very interested by Emily and Nicole's speech, that what is interesting is a global alliance, which is very, very tricky, because if you work with a global alliance, was very interesting, if you start from another part of the world, you can arrive to the Finnish agency. And also you can arrive directly to Italy. I was impressed because we are experiencing, Esther and all the other colleagues that are in Padova now, that they're working hard for this. We are experiencing that it's easier to come from outside Italy and to work with the Italian university than working with the Italian university inside Italy. So, which is, this could be strange, but it's normal for a state that have very strict rules for relationship between the universities and what is happening outside the university. So the second achievement is we need alliance, and we need alliance that start from a global point of view that can work with the other university. The third achievement, in my opinion, is that we can work a lot on academic literature. That means academic writing about academic freedom, which is not so popular in scientific papers. And as I saw, we can work a lot on global studies related to academic freedom, because I don't see any, as Michael said before, any cultural difference. There's not very much cultural experience, but the right has to be universal, like all the other rights. But the academic freedom is more universal than the other universal rights. So just a closing remarks is if we can work from a global point of view, and we can work with EU funding, which is very important in this experience. We can also work from the European dimension to work for the very difficult, this is one issue which is very important, very difficult asylum procedures. Asylum procedures are related to the states. And so if we work globally, but if we work, I assume the European point of view, if we work, we can just work on, this is part of the European immigration policy that is very difficult to express if you don't work from the European point of view to the state level. Otherwise, we have always the same problem for every host, that you have to deal with national law. So if we want to achieve the universal human rights, as Michael stressed before, we really have to work looking from the global point of view, arriving to the EU point of view, but also working with the state point of view. So I think that we this morning was very, very, very important for the achievement for the future. And I asked if there are any comments or any questions from the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gianmario. I wonder first if our speakers would like to respond to Gianmario's comments.
Well, I just want to emphasize again the importance of the touchstone of human rights and never allow us to be deflected, terrorized by people who claim that a particular national, ethnic, or religious tradition relativizes human rights. Human rights are universal, but that does not mean that they have been universally applied, universally recognized, or are yet universally recognized. Human rights is a constant struggle. This we must never forget. When we talked about the history of the University of Padova, how hard it was to reach the level where it was finally accepted that women could be full professors as well as men. This was not automatically granted. I wanted to add something else, and I choose not to avoid the most painful. When a certain universal value is invoked to deny universal human rights, a religious value, I think we have to confront this head on. Currently, when the Taliban leadership in Kabul denies educational and other fundamental rights to women, they claim to be representing the words of God, the will of God. If you think this is a caricature, we have reliable witnesses who tell us how Taliban inspectors board buses, and if people complain, they say, "Don't complain to us, complain to God. We are carrying out God's law." Well, this has to be confronted because we could be reminded in the Western tradition of how Roman Catholicism, and I'll just choose one American year, 1511, had reached about the lowest possible moral level in its entire history. In 1511, you had an evil pope, and the Vatican was a byword for moral corruption, Julius II. You had the Portuguese and Spanish empires, which had just declared with papal approval that people who had darker skins, meaning Native Americans or African blacks, were condemned forever to slavery because they were the descendants of the people of Ham in the Bible. So this was used as a religious justification. Such was the corruption of the Roman Catholic Church in 1511 that you could have imagined that the religion was going to disintegrate because it no longer had a moral leg to stand on. And what happened? A miracle. On Christmas Mass, midnight Mass of December 1511, on the island of Hispaniola, future Haiti, where the young Spanish nobleman had just spent the day on horseback chasing indigenous Native Americans in the mountains with horses and dogs to enslave, Father Antonio de Montesinos made the following sermon to this congregation. He said, "I'm not going to give you Holy Communion because you have betrayed your Christ, because you have betrayed your humanity, because you have betrayed your God. This is what you have done." The congregation remained absolutely astonished. They demanded that he be recalled to Spain. And yet, Antonio de Montesinos made one convert, the young Spanish nobleman Bartolomé de las Casas, who spent the rest of his entire existence defending blacks and defending American Indians. And Martin Luther King and Desmond Tutu come out of that tradition which saved Christianity. It is the little slender thread between modern popes like Francis and the teachings of Jesus. It took just that slender thread, a few people. Today, I do not hesitate to say that Islam as a culture is wallowing in the same moral trough that Christianity was wallowing in 500 years ago. And that means that every Afghan and every Syrian who belongs to that faith, and every Iranian and every Pakistani and every Moroccan and every Nigerian is going to have to get up and say to the Taliban, no, you are misrepresenting our faith. You are projecting your own vision of God on the God in whom we believe, and we say to you, no, but you must say it. You cannot, as Afghans, always depend on this American, that French person, that Italian academic to do it for you. You must do it, but you must be very brave about it. And so now we are faced with a fundamental existential question. All these interveners have talked about welcoming your scholars to various Western institutions. But is it just to detract you away from your country, to subtract you and integrate you into the United States, Italy, France, Germany, Sweden, wherever? Or is it for you, from your exile, to work towards reconstructing your country? Because the American University of Afghanistan is going to stand very much for nation building. One of the speakers here very movingly talked about how the United States welcomed Thomas Mann, German writer. In the 1930s and 1940s, Thomas Mann found refuge in the United States with such programs. But what did Thomas Mann do? Did he just say, okay, I'm American now and I forget about Germany? No, he continued to write the greatest German prose of the 20th century with Kafka. He continued to affirm his German culture. He spoke on the radio to the German people, and today the German nation thanks Thomas Mann for preserving that thin line between a great German civilization and the perversion of the Nazi era. And this is the mantle that falls on you. And so, yes, with Julia, we will welcome you to Venice. We will work with you in Italy and in the United States and in other European countries. But we want you to behave like Thomas Mann. Preserve your culture, defend what's best about it, proclaim it to the world, and engage in the struggle for your Afghan contribution to the universality of human rights, men and women. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks to all the speakers. And there is no time for further questions, but it's lunchtime and everyone is welcome to address what Michael and the others have said. 5 minutes comments. Ah, okay, okay. Lunchtime.
After lunch, we will be going into different rooms. So I guess as SAR coordinators, Francesca, Esther, and myself, we would like to say a few words. So we can continue the conversation over lunchtime. Sì, grazie mille.